Welcome again to Wickerson Studios. We are looking into Generative Algorithms by Zubin Khabazi. Pretty amazing stuff. And what I'm going to do is run through some of the scripts that are online for free. If you download them, you're going to have to put them together. I haven't tracked down the GH files, and I'm not actually interested in finding them. I'm much more interested in working from printed copies of what he's working on. And I've generated this very simple landscape that responds to the surface texture that I have from another snippet that I use down here, but mainly the script we're covering is up top. So let's just go in the perspective window, go into shaded, take everything we have here, which I use a great big external plane because I like making my own kind of studio when I'm rendering as opposed to not. You'll see that there's not much here, but this massive plane, and what I'm going to do is jump right into here into the script that manages this geometry that pops up on this surface plane, and then ignore this here, and then in the sense of that surface, and then you can ignore the orientation of it. That's what we're basically building in many forms as we change it, and the rest will kind of follow suit as we put it into where we need to put it. So I'm going to take off all this secondary stuff and put disable off, preview off, and that should allow me to, I believe it was preview off. I could probably just take it to disable. Sorry for the slowdown this early morning. I got 3 kids running around, but let's go into the scripts and see what's there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this first one here, which is generated, which is pretty easy. Put it on preview on, and you'll see they deal with numbers and patterns and data and how you can control that. So basically there is a rectangle with points put around it, and I'll jump into here. A rectangle with points put around it that are divided, and there's a number list associated with that from 0 through 11 as it rolls around. You can change the point size to visualize, and you can change the point count. I'm going to leave it at 0 through 11. That said, you're going to grab that script, turn it off, go down to the second stage of that, which he has in there very easily. Turn the preview on there. You'll notice that we have the same script with the numbers, with the points on it. We have the points, which I'm actually going to take off. And we're going, well, we could leave them on. We're basically building our own codes counting 1, 11, 5, 7. And that will go into our point list items. And those point list items will be there, 1, 11, 5, 7. And the same goes for these points. And then there's a simple polyline, closing those polylines between it, and you get this strange tessellation. And this is tessellation with matrices. So once that's built up, and I'm moving pretty quickly, I understand, we'll turn that one off, and we'll come down here to this script, which is kind of the final one, playing with it, which is making it into more of a motif, and there's a lot of information there, so we'll pan out a little bit, and we'll try and not grab everything. I had the rectangle on, and I'll just leave it on for now. We definitely had that script working to those points, but instead they decided to use a rectangular grid, which you have control over how many you want to space that out. If you put that into the curve, you're actually going to have this, as long as I put it on preview, preview on, you could see that we have that grid work that's been spaced out across all that, and its XY extends, and you have your divided points on there. You have your point count, which gets a little crazy. If you zoom in on it, you're going to see that it keeps going around each one, so there's no real point in visualizing that. You have your index numbers here, your index numbers here, and you pull them into those lines, and you have this strange tessellation that you can actually have control over by sliding these numbers. Not just that, but actually the point count is going to make those numbers work or not work as we go through it. Sorry, I apologize for that. So we're going to take that point count. You see we actually control some pretty cool geometries to what we want to make. That said, there's many grids: hexagonal, radial, rectangular, square, triangular. You can make your own. All you have to do is think about how they're constructed geometrically, and they're a little trickier, but I'd say give it a try. And what we have here, I'll go back into those polylines, and there's the tessellation of dealing with a hexagonal grid. I'll take it off so we can see it. There's a lot of data and information there. Hexagonal grid's pretty cool, dealing with those points and the patterns in between. I'm just jumping around a little bit. I haven't piped anything. I haven't done anything besides point and line. You don't want to get into that. And I'm going to grab a radial grid, which actually is the one I really like. So ignore those other ones. We'll go into this radial grid and have this tessellation which I think is pretty cool. I'll have to shrink back and zoom in. Hard to see everything, so take off the point items as well. We're just going to deal with these and see that pattern that arises. Now that's a very interesting pattern that I like finding the monster within this of what makes it work and what doesn't make it work. What I found was that if I took that data and I ran down here and brought it together into a merge tool, it's still sitting on a flat surface. I have this other surface that I really like using. And I'm going to enable all of this. My other two scripts enable. And you can see there I have a surface that I've edited, and I have it as another example, which you can go into it. I think it was a surface edit dealing with maths of pretty parametric, pretty awesome in how I can space that, change the surface of that, and have this really cool landscape that I use time and again for my renderings. And I'll go into detail on that in a second video. But that basically I wanted to just orient from that surface, these points onto that surface. And you can see how they change as I bring them down. And I literally just project them on. Just do a drop-down project onto that boundary representation. So if I change that surface, I change those tessellations. Now, a very interesting thing that's happened as I go in here is these curves kind of, because of their points, they lift and they don't touch one another as I do that. They don't become closed surfaces. And this is the real trick to this, and I think the gold in this little demo. And the reason you have to be creative and you have to find things. So really critical moment in the video. If I take them to boundary surfaces, they're only going to pick and choose the ones that actually cross over and touch. And I have all this strange geometry, and to me, those are foundations for some pretty cool, before we go farther to extrusions, pretty cool geometries that I can make into buildings. So as I move this, you'll see they come together, they touch, I get different buildings in different locations. And I also can go in and play with the count on those, that change the geometries, to see what I can make as I go through it. So what an infinite range of strange cityscapes I could make. And there's one that picks up. And what I do is I follow with a very simple script that I use time and again, and I'll walk you through that. I'm basically just extruding these. I extrude them through a jitter, which I always do, through a range, dropping the range, through the, putting them in the Z direction, putting them back through a range. I have to go into my expression tool and -1 from the list count coming out of the surfaces. I flatten the surfaces here to have 16 surfaces. I don't know if it's necessary to flatten. It is, and you get a totally different geometry if you do that. Grafting's going to make a big mess of it. I've also flattened over here again, which probably is not necessary to do it twice. I was playing around with it. So I have a list item list that says, okay, 16 bases come out. So use the range, put it through a jittered range of how those things will actually explode up as pieces of architecture. And I think still skyscraper mentality, because I'm just not that intelligent and I'm almost 50 years old. All right, and the seed, of course, changes all those patterns of how those would raise up. That said, I also have that surface. I can pop back on that undulating surface. It responds to what's there, and you're left with a pretty cool thing. So that's a lot of information once again. But what I say, go into these things, have fun with it. I've lost the polyline here, which says there's a little warning. I don't mind warnings. I think sculptors are the best people out there in the world, artists, in a sense of dealing with misfortune, because I've been faced with it my whole life. Nothing ever works out perfectly. So how do you deal with that? And how do you run with that? And how do you make some scripts? So I'm going to take this whole script. I'm just going to hit it on disable. And I'm going to pull back out the geometry that I scripted before. And for some reason, I baked a monstrosity here. Hopefully, I did that in group. I'm going to... This is the example when you start using too many files and you start bearing things. I'm just going to show you a little temporary thing. Let's just take the building curves and put them on this object layer and hide them away. I already have something hidden away there. I have this surface edit, which I'm going to set to this object layer and hide away. And I'm just going to lock that one so I don't ever open it up. And then I've got the base plane here, which I'm going to set to one object layer and tuck away. Oops, I think I set both things on there. And then this whole thing was passed from a past script, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And that just makes it easier for me to bring back out those geometries and these geometries and deal with this as a strange scape and then tuck it back in to my render mode. And there you go. I've got some selected colors and metals for it, and I can put it into a very fast render. And I think my rendering is on final. Let's just do a draft render and fire it off. So that's under 10 minutes. It shows how you can just grab a pretty cool script that's coming out of the Generative Algorithms of Zubin Khabazi. I'm sure he's going to go far and project it and have different surfaces, but you get ahead of yourself when you're watching these tutorials. Why not? Just use your own wits, figure out what you think is going to happen. Always take from what you know, put in other things. And the main thing with this digital modeling is think microscopic, think cosmological. Like I've got this little group called the ITCSU, which is the Intergalactic Technological Campaign into the Search for the Unknown. And I invented that a couple of years ago, and I don't think I have any members, but I'm willing to accept people that want to come along board. Hopefully you enjoyed that. We're going to continue with the generative algorithms and take what Khabazi's doing, and I'm going to reference those points. I'm just looking through some pretty awesome real-life architectural things that can motivate you. And if we run through, I'm just looking fairly fast, creating geometries. He's going to go a little farther and start to bring them onto non-planar surfaces. And then he's going to end and go into chapter 4, which is transformations. So thanks for watching the first 3 chapters of it, and I hope I still get a following and people interested in what's happening. I'm rambling and stalling for this little rendering for you to see it. I like these little things. I just pop them up everywhere. For me, art is a conceptual exercise, and technology is just things we use to get at whatever we can conceptually in our own mind. And the computer definitely is the tool for what I think the 21st century sculpture needs to be working in. Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to Michael Wickerson on YouTube.